Oh, welcome to this week's edition of Attune to the Moon, the week ahead in the astrology. My name's Jana Romer, and we also have Nadia, who the screen will pop over when she starts talking. This week is actually quite an intense week in the astrology. As we're recording this, the moon is in Scorpio. Tuesday evening, it moves into Sagittarius, and then we are in eclipse season. The full moon in Sagittarius on Wednesday, the 26th, is a super moon. It's an eclipse. It's within 5 degrees of the actual moon. So I think this is one of totality, if I read that correctly. It's at 4:31 a.m. PST. And so it kind of, we're in it. And then there's a lot going on throughout the week as well, including at the end of the week, we have Mercury stationing retrograde. And one of the things that I think is important for us to remember is that Saturn stationed retrograde on the 23rd. So that was on Saturday. And at the time of the lunar eclipse, Saturn is still at the stationing degree. Like Saturn has not stopped moving. And so before I get too much into the eclipse, I wanted to speak a little bit to Saturn, because Saturn is like taking this giant pause right now, where he's just like, whoa, 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 like this big, strong energy that's saying like, hold up, wait a second, what are you doing? And it can feel a little bit like things are stalling, or maybe things aren't moving, or maybe there's some doubt or some question or an examination of your own integrity, or coming into some questions along the lines of like your relationship with authority, or your inner authority, or your sovereignty, and all of this stuff. And while this is happening, Saturn is very close to the exact degree of squaring off with Uranus. And so, underneath everything that we're going to speak of this week, we have to remember that a big piece of the underlying energy is this squaring off between the old, the tradition, what's been safe and secure and trusted and true, and the discontinuous energy, spontaneity, surprise of this new innovative energy coming in. And so I don't believe that it's meant to cause us to suffer. I do believe that it's meant to help us in our awakening process, because Uranus is the great awakener, and Saturn helps get us in line with our integrity. And to me, when I look at this, the image that's been coming to my mind is like an hourglass shape, where every time we have these strong Uranus Saturn events this year, we have 3 of them. It's like everything is coming to this point, like that square, the point of the square, where we're being asked, like, are you in integrity? Things are going to change pretty dramatically. Are you paying attention? Are you putting the right energy into this? Are you adding to this collective story that is unfolding in the way that's in alignment with your highest and best and with your integrity? And so when it gets uncomfortable is when we're not in alignment, and when we're not paying attention, and when we're not necessarily, yeah, I would say present to whatever is going on. And so that's underneath everything. That's underneath everything. Before I go too far down the rabbit hole, though, Nadia, do you want to add anything to just the like underlying piece that's playing along with us?
No, I think you said it quite clearly. I think that we've had a lot of questions in this group about like where to go next, what to do, where's the path. This is not the time to decide or to even know. This is the time to be in that's that discomfort that you feel is like, are you in integrity with yourself? And if you're uncomfortable, then you need to figure out, why are you uncomfortable? If the answer and the solution is not going to come right away. And astrologically, this period is like you said, Jana, a holding period. So I know that there's this like impetus in so many people to move forward, to go ahead. And so that's when you decide, like, do I just move forward and trust? That's the big word that's been coming up to me with me lately. And I just taught a trust meditation this morning. Do I just trust that if I'm that the container of the universe is going to hold me and that it's going to all be okay, even if it's not necessarily the right decision? Or do I find ways to procrastinate by overthinking every single thing that I do, which I think is a major theme of the Sagittarius full moon coming up, because moon is square Jupiter during the eclipse. So that's like the 1000% aspect of like being so caught up in your emotions and your mood that you don't project yourself forward because you're afraid, or you think that I don't know. So it's like either you make an impetuous decision that's actually brave and more in alignment with the astrology, or you sit and you ponder for way too long and you procrastinate something which is not in alignment, or you kind of come to the middle and figure out like how to be in integrity and do like that hard work that you're supposed to be doing during this time, because that's the Saturn retrograde. It's not, Saturn retrogrades aren't as hard as Saturn direct. Actually, it's sometimes harder for people though, because you internalize things versus like acting on it. Does that feel resonant with you, Jana, what I just said?
Yeah, 100%. I had a consultation with a long time student yesterday, and she was like, the astrology, it's not lining up with my life right now. And without getting into too much detail, she just finished recording a whole like virtual course and the whole thing, and she was like, it just doesn't seem like the right time to launch. And I said, are you really ready? Have you looked at all aspects of what you're doing? Because if we look at the themes, which is what we're going to get into today, it's about your belief systems and radically eclipsing the beliefs that hold you back from living your purpose and from being connected to, I love that Nadia said, that container of the universe. Can you trust that it's going to hold you? Are you connected to that? And so I didn't tell her what to do, but I suggested that perhaps the creation process of this course that she's putting out doesn't end with the recording being edited. The creation process includes her own experience with the limiting beliefs around, will this be successful? What is it to be a mom entrepreneur? Am I okay with being visible online? Do I have fears around XYZ? And looking at the beliefs, and I was like, if you really want to do this with the astrology, then you wouldn't launch right now. You would I mean, if it was me, I'd put it on my website with just maybe a teaser on my Instagram that it's coming, but then make it available on my website without actually launching it, and then do my personal work of making sure that my beliefs are in alignment with its success. And that's not just like, can I make money? It's also, is the work that I'm putting out worthy of being ingested by the people who it's created for? Do you know what I mean? And like, it's not about money, actually. It's about how many people can I help? And sometimes we need to shift that focus. Like every time I focus on money, I collapse. Every time I focus on how many people I can help, it expands. And so just looking at all of those little beliefs and ensuring that you've got the alignment there in the way that is actually going to create the success of this project. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, just because the astrology is saying don't launch doesn't mean that the astrology is saying pause. It's saying you also need to look at this before the thing is fully ripened, right? So if we look at what this lunar eclipse, like I just started madly last night. Mark took the kids out for 2.5 hours, and I was like, okay, I've got 2.5 hours to write. And just some stuff really came through for me. And if we're looking at Sagittarius themes, first of all, the South Node is on the eclipse. So that means it has a lot to do with releasing, letting go, but also not just releasing, but how do we alchemize the past into a more usable thing for the future? Because we remember that underlying thing of like old guard to new guard, or tradition to innovation. So I still love the story that Guru Singh shared where the tree was cut down out of the yard because of construction, but the tree didn't actually die because they repurposed it into a table and they repurposed it into a bench. And so just because the life as it knew it had come to an end doesn't mean that the life had actually ended, because energy never actually dies. It just continues forward. And so when we're looking at the south node of the moon, what we're looking at is, okay, sure, these things are going to be let go of, but how do I take what I learned from the things that I'm letting go and let it bolster me for as I'm moving forward? And some Sagittarius themes, I love just going very physical first. Sagittarius lives in the legs, the thighs. It is a centaur. And so it's this half demigod, half mythical creature, half human. And when I look at the legs, it's like, are you willing to take that leap? Like Sagittarius has the archer, Artemis is a goddess that often is used with Sagittarius. And it's like to follow your own path, to go your own way, to trust in your truth and to follow your dharma. And that requires that we take a leap, and with Sagittarius, I think one of the leaps that we're taking is we're going from the head to the heart, even though we don't necessarily say that. But if we look at the fire signs, we're going from Leo is the previous fire sign, which is all about the heart and asking us to embody the heart. And then the legs is like leaping that heart into, that expression of path and purpose. And so some key words with Sagittarius are relationship with source or our own religion or spirituality. It is our belief systems and the nature of the mind. It is, and that goes hand in hand with foreign cultures or long distance travel or understanding something that's different than what is yours. It's also truth, like Nadia said, trust, truth. It's the seeker. It's why am I kind of blanking on some more? I always think of Sagittarius as kind of a lone wolf, because and you guys probably know this, because when you step onto your spiritual path, there's a part of the transition from moving to somewhat of an unconscious life to a more consciously curated life where you have to step out on your own. And sometimes it feels very lonely when old friends don't quite fit where you are now evolving your perspective of reality through. And if we look at the opposite of Sagittarius, we have Gemini, and the sun is in Gemini, and the sun in Gemini is reminding us, like, ask the question why, stay in the question. The answer is part of the process, but the question is more important than the answer. And when we look at Sagittarius, we're looking at understanding source. Like, there is no like one answer for that. It's the question. It's to be in the question that actually allows for the richness for that to be there. And so a big message that came through for me as I was looking at the chart of this eclipse is like, no more blind faith. Like, why are we moving forward and making decisions through blind faith? And like the Sagittarius is also the mentor or the higher learning or moving beyond the standard education and moving into a like more specialized, deeper education. And so with all the things that are going on in the world right now, why are we just following blindly the white men that we've just spent the last 2 years trying to dismantle their power? Yet our actual things that we're doing in the world is just fully following the white man's lead without question, and we're not even allowed to question. And I'm not talking about any particular topic. Like, you look at who's running the world right now, and it's all white men, pretty much. And well, maybe not the whole world, but World Health Organization and all these things, right? And so I think there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance between the work that we've been doing to like elevate the marginalized communities and hearing the voices of the marginalized communities, where now we're like up against this old guard, the white man, and the new of like the diverse voice of the people. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance that we need to find some balance in there with on I think this moon could really help us. And then Nadia was saying her workshop on trust, and that was a big thing that came for me. Like, who do you trust? And why do you trust them? And are they trustworthy? And have you looked at their track record? And do you trust yourself? And are you brave enough to trust your intuition? And are you in right relationship with source or the universe or the unified field or whatever you want to call that, to trust that even through the discomfort, that we're being led somewhere better, that we're being led to greater awakening, that we're being led to um, like personally, I believe that the universe is a benevolent force that's here to help us awaken. But do you trust that? Or are you skeptical or suspicious of that? Right? So these are pretty big questions for this eclipse. And then once all of that kind of piece has been looked at within ourselves, are you bold enough to take that leap? Like, if you do trust your intuition and you do trust that you're being guided and you do trust that there is a new world being formed at the same time that another world is attempting to be dismantled, yet really not yet. It hasn't been dismantled yet. And then this like moves into just a wide swath of topics. Like, I've been getting really excited about cryptocurrency and alternate power sources and like all the different ways that if we are for real dismantling system and structure, if you're still like sucking from the the nipple of the structure, you're not helping dismantle it yet. So I was looking at cryptocurrency from the perspective of like, well, okay, so in the world right now, the currencies that we currently abide by, each country has its own currency, or Europe has its euro that it agrees with. What if different communities started getting into different cryptocurrencies? And as crypto becomes more changeable, then the cryptocurrencies become not so much dedicated to a nation, but dedicated to an ideology or dedicated to a belief system, like a shared ideology. And so then like all of a sudden, if let's say, I was just reading about this one cryptocurrency called Stellar, and they're trying to be tradable through the app called Signal. And I thought this was really interesting because Signal is an app that is encrypted in a way that doesn't allow for spying on it. So if we get into like the whole technocracy world, it's like Signal is saying nobody is listening to your conversation here. Yes, they are on Facebook. Yes, they are on Google. Yes, they are on Apple. Yes, they are everywhere else. WhatsApp, Instagram, you name it, all not only being listened to, but sold. And like there's a whole thing with that going on. But Signal saying we will protect your privacy. And then we're looking to build Stellar as the cryptocurrency that then is exchanged within that privacy. And I was like, oh, what a cool little niched out market. If all of a sudden all these people that are really valuing privacy over everything else then also get on board with Stellar as their cryptocurrency, and then what does that look like? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying? And so to make that leap, whether it is your path and purpose or the collective path and purpose in how we participate in the dismantling through your actions, through your words, through your investments, through your everything. Like, are you buying your groceries from Ralph's or Safeway, or are you going to the farmer? Are you buying, like, are you putting a solar panel on your house? I know that's a super privileged thing for me to say, but I want one too, but I don't have one. Like, are you putting a solar panel on your house, or are you still like drawing from the grid? And just looking at all of the ways that we do support that overall system that we are vocally trying to dismantle, but are we dismantling it through our actions? And that's a collective purpose. And so we can use this moon as like an opportunity to look at the beliefs like, well, no, I have to be part of the system because no, you don't. Can you look at that belief? Oh, well, but if I don't be a part of the system, then, well, okay, but why do you believe that? And if that wasn't true, then what could be true? And that's the way I'm personally playing with this eclipse, because we can make some radical shifts and changes in the way that we do this. Because when we're not living our purpose, and for me, part of, I think, our shared purpose is to dismantle these power heads. And part of our collective purpose is to empower the marginalized and more diverse voices and like really move it from the central features to the people, then we need to also have our actions aligned with that. That's part of our purpose. And so when we don't activate that as part of our purpose for incarnating at this time, then we're helping to keep those abusive power heads in power. You see? We're playing, where are you showing up? So it's a good thing we've talked about it, but now we got to do something about it. So I kind of digress away a little bit from the moon exactly, but it's like all the other things going on in the astrology has to be taken into consideration always. And so I'm going to put my mute button on and let Nadia share hers, because we always have a slightly different perspective. And that's also Gemini Sagittarius for sure, like change perspectives. So thanks, Nadia.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a slightly different perspective, although I don't ever really think about cryptocurrency or prepping or any of that kind of stuff because my brain doesn't go there. But in the eclipse energy is known in many circles, especially in pagan astrology, to be connected with the goddess Hecate, who is one of the goddesses of the moon. She's the triple moon goddess. She is the goddess of witchcraft. And I've noticed, in this moon energy, and it's so interesting that you talked about Sagittarius being the lone wolf, because I literally wrote that on the top of my notes. This is like the Red Riding Hood. I feel like this is the Red Riding Hood eclipse. This is when we are becoming the wolf, because just like you were talking about these white men that lead these businesses, that have established dominance in the world, let's say, we can consider them sort of the wolves. And how do we ourselves become the wolf? How do we put on the wolf's what is it, it's the sheep and wolves, the wolf in sheep's clothing, I don't know. How do we become the wolf in and of itself? I've always imagined, like, if Red Riding Hood ended the way that I wanted it to, instead of her she would become the wolf. Like, she would end up becoming the one that, and in that way, she became like a divine protectress. And I know I'm going off on my mythological tangent, but I'm going to come back to center. So there's a kind of, I'm going to even just use the word, there's kind of violence to this energy. Not that violence in and of itself may occur, but there's a violent feeling inside of you, like a volcanic urge, something, a hunger, that like simple mammal primordial energy that wants to be recognized, that wants to be fed. But then what's in Sagittarius, which, when again, if we're looking back mythologically, is actually Chiron, not to be confused with the asteroid, but the Sagittarius centaur was the tamed beast, which is Chiron was the only centaur that was tamed. All the rest of them were sort of reckless and crazy and wild and weird. Chiron was the one that was raised by Apollo and was like very sophisticated and this is where we get the Sagittarius wisdom from, is actually Chironic wisdom. So for any of you that have like Chironic energy in your charts, you're going to be feeling the discomfort of this, and more so of like negotiating between that like primal, simple, hungry animal that Hecate, whose job is to illuminate, is illuminating that part of you, and then trusting in like that inner wisdom, that inner teacher. And so this is sort of like the negotiation between like the over emotionality, the violent, over the top feelings, that intensity that we sort of are getting to know very clearly before the actual full moon itself, because we're in the Scorpio moon, which is very intense and it brings up a lot of stuff. I myself am a Gemini sun Scorpio moon, so this is like my solar lunar return kind of. And it's where you go in and you sort of root down deep and just find like the rotten, gangrenous pieces of yourself, and you like pull them out. And it's not fun and it's not easy, but it is eventually hilarious when you look back on it. And it's just part of our nature as animals. We are animals. And that is what, and Chiron, which was half animal, half human, is that reminder. And so is Sagittarius, half animal, half human, the reminder of that animal self and how we kind of have to I don't even, I don't want to say the word tame that part, because I think that that's not the correct language, but we have to understand it and allow it, and allow ourselves to kind of get into the animal part of ourselves. And then from there, figure out how to move beyond it, how to transcend it. When we talk about like, you know, Jana's been talking about like resource scarcity and whatnot. Resource scarcity has already existed for like 80% of the world's population. It's just that rich, or not rich, or middle class, or people are finally seeing like, oh, I'm ordering something online, it's not going to come to me. But when it, you know, it's not coming to me on time, like the shipping is delayed. What's that all about? Resource scarcity is people all over the world for like their whole lives have been dealing with resource scarcity, even in our communities, like marginalized communities of very poor people live in food deserts and have resource scarcity. And as we become, you know, those of us that are privileged and have the ability to sort of like go to Whole Foods and like get our food whenever we want, or order from Instacart or whatever, and you know, I can get my siete tortillas so I can eat my like paleo diet. And we're sort of seeing like this is not sustainable, not for the collective. Like we're not able to, you know, this is not going to be, this is something where we have to come back to that simple animal inside of us and ask that animal, like, what does that animal really need? And then find the wisdom from that. And I want to say this the right way because I got a little distracted by some noise. I think that we have to look beyond ourselves in everything. Like Jana said, she used the word collective. We have to look beyond ourselves. This has nothing to do with us. In the long run, all this pain, all this discomfort, everything that we're feeling, this has nothing to do with us. This is sort of like a general unease that we're finally tuning into. That's what I feel. Like this is something that we're finally tuning into. That's what Hecate, who is the goddess of eclipses, is illuminating. This is what Chiron, who is our teacher and our mentor, is showing us. That there's more to the story. And the other thing that I wanted to say that I wrote down that Jana already said was like, when I was working with the theme of trust, it's about trusting yourself and really nobody else in the long run. You know, like that sounds very dire, but that's kind of what it comes down to. Like, you have to trust yourself, you trust your intuition, you trust your knowledge. And if somebody else agrees with you, that's great, but don't even trust the people that agree with you. Just trust yourself. And that's what I have to say about that. Obviously, I'm in my Scorpionic moon phase right now, so I'm feeling very intense, but I'm not going to apologize for it.
So the day after the lunar eclipse, we have Venus square Neptune, and we've been watching this Venus square Neptune for a while now. And I know Nadia will have more to say about this, but briefly, what I see with Venus and Neptune is just like how Mars and Pluto are buddies with each other. They work well together, and Mercury and Uranus work well together. Venus and Neptune work well together. They both have like this love vibe where Venus is like our interrelationship, like our close relationships. Neptune is our interrelationship, the collective conscious. It's the psychic field. It's the subconscious mind. It's the unconscious mind. It's like a very expansive interrelatability. And that's why we have this Neptune showing us this really fine line between completely psychic, because somewhere in Neptune, we are connected to 100% of absolutely everything in the whole entire universe. And then the illusion that Neptune can place upon us, where we think what we see is what it is, but it's a reflection of our subconscious programming. And so it's square Venus. And so it's like our egoic love and our universal love squaring off against each other. It's our own programs versus the program of the collective squaring off against each other. But it also gives us this really cool opportunity if you're willing to deconstruct and dismantle your own belief systems. I personally believe that it's going to help us with this lunar eclipse, because if we're wanting to see more truth, and then right away we have this Venus square Neptune that has this like kind of head off on that as well. And so I know both Nadia and I shared Jessica Lanyato's post about not doing any magic or ritual on eclipses. And then I really sat with this and I was like, it can be done. It just needs to be done very, very well. And for myself, I am going to just ask for truth. I want truth to be revealed. I want to see my misconceptions. I want to see where my belief prevents me from seeing truth. I'm going to ask for that, and that is bold, on a moon like this, like that's bold to say like, no, I want to see, because you could be confronted with yourself in such a way that it could kind of shatter your reality. And I'm like at the place where I'm like, no, I actually just want to see, shatter it. Like let life be a living ayahuasca journey where all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, what is happening? But like not taking any medicine, just the medicine of revelation. And then shortly after that on Thursday, the moon moved. Or do you want to say anything about the Venus square Neptune?
No, I think that was great. But also, I also wrote down about ritual that I was going to say something about
You
that
did?
too, Jana. Yeah, because I was like looking into it and the nature of Hecate, and then I started to wonder, like, so this whole idea of not doing ritual on the eclipse, I think is sort of like a modern, um, almost like social media based assessment. And this is sort of like where we're getting, because there's so many sources for astrology out there. And as I was like learning, in the 90s and like the 2000s, and I was learning from like these, I always say like weirdos and wizards, like no one ever said anything about don't do magic on the eclipse. In fact, that's the liminal space. That's like a huge portal of energy where like really fantastic, like earth shattering magic can occur. I think it's kind of like when you're going through a kundalini, like you're doing like people talk about their kundalini rising, but they don't really even understand what that means. And they've done work way too fast. And all of a sudden, like their life breaks apart and they think they're becoming like psychotic or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's like you're working with the most powerful, potent energy and you're doing it like super fast. Like the timeline is super fast. If you've been doing work slowly up until this point and you want to work in the liminal portal and you want to shatter something in your life because you really feel like it's necessary and you want that ayahuasca trip, I'm going to say go for it. If you are not mentally, emotionally, and even physically prepared, because lunar eclipses, like historically in ritual work, are detoxes. Like you may even feel like it deep in your gut, like gut problems, nausea, all this stuff coming up, similar to like the Kundalini rising energy. Because also you have to think about the nodes are they're considered to be like this great dragon. So it's like the head of the dragon, the tail of the dragon, or this serpent energy. So that is Kundalini energy, right? So what you're working with, as long as you're comfortable with the discomfort and everything that's going to break apart at the end of it, then I would say or also be expanded in such magnificent ways. But really, when you get like really huge expansion, it's like high risk, high reward. You have to be able to deal with the risk of it all. And Hecate, really, like if you want a softer ritual, I would say a ritual of devotion, because we're coming in, this is like Hecate's season of the eclipse. And it's about devoting yourself to an energy that like a holistic energy, or devoting yourself to a goddess, a deity, centering yourself and focusing and devoting yourself. And that, and maybe asking in this liminal place, like, can a teacher that is sort of like a mirror of me come in and be an example of like who I could become like, or something. But just Venus square Neptune, perfect. I just call that the rose-colored glasses transit in my mind. It's really like about self-deception. So, or mental interference, not clearly seeing things, being fooled. But it's like the fool's journey. We're at the beginning of something. Maybe you notice that somebody has been lying to you, or some situation hasn't quite been in its integrity. And this comes back to the trust. And so then you're like, well, I'm just ready to purge all of this shit, let go of it, and have a clean slate. So I think it does enhance the eclipse, even if it feels uncomfortable. It enhances what the eclipse is trying to do.
Okay, I'm going to cruise through. We have on Friday, we have Venus conjunct Mercury, which is quite auspicious, I think, because we're moving into Mercury retrograde the following day. And with Venus and Mercury conjunct at the beginning of the retrograde, I think we need to pay attention to that for a theme throughout the retrograde: communication and relationships. The Mercury retrograde, I just wrote like literally pages and pages and pages on it. But like this Mercury retrograde, it has a lot to do with deconstructing story, relationships, the way we project in relationships, the way that we can see ourselves in relationship. There's so much to do with relationship in this Mercury retrograde, because it's also in Gemini. And so like, are we even in relationship with people, or are we in relationship with different images of ourselves as reflected by different people? That's my question for this retrograde. Like, are you even in relationship with people? Okay, it's just a mirror. Here's the twin. This looks like Nadia. This is me. From my perspective, Nadia looks like me. Over here, we have Belinda in relationship with Nadia. From Belinda's perception, Nadia looks like Belinda. Over here, we have Jackie in relationship with Nadia. From Jackie's perspective, Nadia looks like Jackie. And so like, who are we really in relationship with? Like, that's the question I want to ask. And I think it's also what we can start to deconstruct through this retrograde. And then what's nice is after Mercury stations retrograde, right away we have Mars trine Neptune. So again, it's like working on our misconceptions, working on our beliefs, working on the illusions and our psychicness. And then with Mars, of course, that's bringing a favorable energy, or it's like, I would say like more so a harmonious energy. So like what you're fighting for, you might get some more fuel for, maybe. I was listening to the astrologer Rick Levine, and he was like, trines, they often say that they're favorable energy, but he was like, you put two drunks in a bar next to each other, and they're like, my wife says I have a drinking problem, and the other drunk is going to be like, your wife doesn't know what she's talking about, you have no problems. And like, they're in trine with each other, they're in harmonious energy with each other, but is that really helping them? Is that really favorable? And I was like, yeah, Rick, you really nailed that one, because that's what it is. It's like, it's putting us in more harmony. And so I think this is one of those moments where, because Mercury is stationing in retrograde, Saturn's just barely starting to move backwards in the sky, we're asking for a big, huge pause, and then looking at how our fight energy, we just align with it. Like, to me, this is part of the social media algorithm problem, where we get validated for what we like, and we find more of who are like us. I think this Mars trine Neptune is actually bringing a little light to the fact, like, hey, you think you're right because you've only surrounded yourself with people that think you're right, and you think that's the cause to fight for because you've only surrounded yourself with people that think that's the cause to fight for. But like, can you also expand your vision, retrograde saying, and like re-look at some of these things? And then on Monday, we have this sun conjunct the North Node. And so I love it how it just like pulls it together. It's like the retrograde's asking us to look at ourselves. Then we're shown the algorithm issue, and then we're being shown like, wait a minute, it's like a resetting with your radiance and your purpose, or like, other keywords that get put with the North Node are like destiny or fate. And are you like shining your light in the direction of that fate, or is there a little bit of a realignment that needs to take place as you turn the lens inward and see everything in your environment, all your relationships, and everything that you're taking in as a mirror or a validator to what's already inside? So I think if I were to give this week a theme, and Nadia and I did not talk about this at all, but I would give this a theme of like, you are not your beliefs. Do not be surprised when your beliefs are shattered. Like, be open to recognizing that what you thought was reality isn't necessarily reality. And I would say, like, be prepared to have some perspective changes. But Nadia, what do you think?
Yeah, and going back to the relationships, because we missed a really huge transit that's moving into Mercury retrograde, which is May 28th, Mercury conjunct Venus. And I looked it up. Mercury is that the conjunction is one of the tightest, closest conjunctions of Mercury and Venus until November 5th of 2033. Meaning, like, the relationship between Mercury and Venus is they're so close to each other that this Mercury retrograde is going to be very much influenced by the Venusian values and ideals and all about relationships. And then we come out of the next, after the onset of the Mercury retrograde, that's, you have that Venus square Neptune, which really sort of enhances this theme, I think. So wherever you are in the world, if you can see the sky and you can see the stars, I would say go and like look and find Venus conjunct Mercury. And, you know, conjunctions are like chaotic neutral, as they say in the worlds now. Conjunctions aren't good or bad. They're just, they're in this like liminal space, which is actually really appropriate for eclipse energy, where it can go either way. When you're working with the Mercury conjunct Venus, like this is often about being very good natured and being loving and being cultured and being very like creating harmony with your words. And also, how have you been sort of, because it's Venus and Gemini in Venus and Mercury and Gemini, how have you sort of been playing both sides, and maybe like even, you know, deceiving yourself in like how you're presenting yourself to other people? Do you present yourself as somebody that's really cultured and quiet and easygoing and cool-headed and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, oh, I'm spiritual and I'm this and I'm that, but like deep down there's like this like I like to just call it like the little baby monster inside of you that's like clawing away, like being like, how do I get out of this? Like I'm in a prison of societal programming. I'm in a prison that, because I feel like I have to be someone who creates harmony in every situation of people pleasing. I'm in this prison. So I think we're really going to see that come out on a personal level and even on a collective level, because I think people are really tired, really tired, especially after last year, of playing up to other people and being basing your life on other people. Like we isolated ourselves, and I think for good reason, so that we could really truly see ourselves and what we need. And now that many of us are going back into the world, reintegrating into the world, it's just not going to vibe anymore. It's not where we have to be integrous to ourselves.
And then there's the polar opposite of Canada getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and different places in the world, it's getting, the restrictions are getting.
Isn't that, is that a province thing though? Because I know people in other parts of Canada that are like able to go out and do things.
Well, it depends. Each province is different, but we definitely, like even in BC where we're pretty free, we're not allowed to travel outside of our local health region. And on the way, there's like vehicles, like police stopping you to be like, why are you traveling? And it's different anywhere. Anyways, let's close this part of it because we got to do some readings. So anybody who's joining us on YouTube, thank you so much for being here. If you want to join us for some mini readings, you can click the link down below, and we'll be back next week.